If you're birthing in a hospital, you're not thinking about the baby. You have 10 interventions just to get to the hospital. Get out of the system and go witness physiological birth.
It takes one critical thinker. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pregnancy's Critical Thinker podcast. My name is Caroline. Today, we have a very interesting subject to talk about. It's birth trauma. And we have an amazing special guest for you, Emmy Robbin, who's a birth worker, somatic coach, if I'm correct, and a big advocate for women's rights in a birth, I guess, experience. So welcome, Emmy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Of course. Well, tell me just like a couple sentences about like what you do so our viewers know what to expect from this podcast.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, birth, right? We talk about birth just as women to women. And a lot of the times I'll hear women out at like a playground, right? And I'll hear them telling their birth story to another mom and it's traumatic. It's not like a happy, positive experience.
Yeah.
And it should be. Our births should be incredible. It should be something that transforms us from maiden to mother. And it should be a spiritual, beautiful event, right? God made us like that. So I try to get women to tap and tune into that, to how we're made, and undisturbed physiological birth can be transformative for the rest of your life. And how you birth can literally affect you in your motherhood and for the rest of your life in your body. You can develop disease from birth trauma. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I really, really have a passion for helping people have incredible undisturbed physiological births without trauma.
And I mean, we're going to get into all of that, but from like get-go, why do you think birth is usually portrayed as like such a painful, like very kind of, this is going to be the worst pain of your life experience?
I mean, it starts with just what we've heard since we were little girls, but going back even further, the medical world became involved in birth 100 years ago, right? And so that's when male obstetricians started entering the birth space and creating this medicalized, pathologized event out of birth when it's actually like a physiological event. And so whenever you take a physiological event that our body is supposed to do and you pathologize it and you make it like, this needs to be managed, this needs to be saved, this needs to this, and not understanding that by not doing something and leaving it alone, you actually create problems. And so through that, we've had issues that have arose. And a lot of women chose to be twilight sleeped, essentially. And, you know, go back in the day. So that's what these men were doing. They were like, hey, we can offer you a pain-free birth. You can come in and be put to sleep, and down the spiral goes, right? A lot of things were starting to happen when that was offered. And instead of understanding that we have pain for a purpose in birth and we are supposed to utilize it. And it's, again, so many people are being sold that birth is painful and you need to be out of pain in order to enjoy your experience. And it's actually the opposite. It's totally the opposite. Like the women who do the undisturbed physiological births, like I talk about, they enjoy it. It is actually a very enjoyable experience. Because
is that because of that Russian hormones that
you're being flooded with oxytocin, you're being flooded with endorphins, which are natural painkillers, but your baby is also. So when you are being taught as a little girl that, you know, because of we were being sold for 100 years that, hey, guess what? Birth doesn't have to be painful. You can get out of birth. You can get out of pain in birth. You know, we can make that happen. But like in that whole thing, we're not thinking about the baby. What does that do?
I guess
what does that do to the baby?
We don't, right? Because like I feel like the whole pregnancy is like so surrounded, like the baby is center of attention. Like, oh, you're gonna have a baby, baby. Especially in postpartum periods, like all about the baby.
Totally.
But then in the end, I guess we don't think about more like underlying.
In the birth, we never think about the baby. I mean, if we're gonna get real, nobody thinks about the baby. If you're birthing in a hospital, you're not thinking about the baby.
Okay.
Even though you think you're thinking about the baby, you're not thinking about the baby. Because if you really were thinking about what's best for baby, you wouldn't disturb your labor. Because anytime you disturb your labor, you're cutting off that natural cocktail flow like Anya talked about. You're cutting off those endorphins and oxytocin, which is what helps the baby stay so calm and cool in birth is because they feel you. Because that's their communication with you, is feeling everything that you feel, all your hormones. So if you're feeling happy, baby's happy. If you're feeling scared, baby's like, what's happening, right? So a lot of what I do is breaking down fear before you go into birth. Because if you can go into birth without fear, then the baby's not going to feel fear. And 99.9% of the time, birth goes amazing. So, you know, to this point that I'm filming with you, I've helped over 70 women have births. I have not had one emergency C-section on my watch.
Ooh, that's
I have had women who wanted to have, I've assisted with, meaning like I've kept them calm with 2 women who chose to have gentle cesareans, right? So
Is that in your doula work or?
I don't do it anymore,
okay.
but I used to. Like whenever I would take hospital births and stuff,
I just a workshop right now. You have?
A workshop to break down fear.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's yeah. Oh yeah. Let's just go to my website. It's all on there. I have a new 6-week course that's going to come out October 6th for couples all over the world. If your time zone aligns, but I'm going to do it on Sunday evenings, so that people all over the time zones can join in. But yeah, it's to break down fears, for couples who are first time parents or couples in their redemption birth, right? We can, through breaking down your fear, I talk about the normalness in birth, and then people hear their own birth stories and they're like, what, but, essentially going back to why do we fear the pain in birth, and why are we sold this hospital can save you or hospital can keep you comfortable in birth, right? It's not true. You're not thinking about the baby in that. So in giving yourself an epidural or in, I talk about it all the time. You have 10 interventions just to get to the hospital. 10 interventions. You've already intervened with your birth 10 times. 1, you're timing your contractions. Why are you timing your contractions? Because you're trying to figure out how far along you are so that you know when to leave to go to the hospital. 2, you're seeking outside assistance. You're seeking outside assurance to tell you that you're doing okay and that you're in labor. So that's 2. You're already like not going inward and listening to your body and being like, I feel comfortable. I want to stay here. 3, you're packing your bag and you're getting in the car. You're like having to get out of labor land to like go walk to get to your car. And you're like, oh my God, this is going to be an uncomfortable ride in my car to the hospital. That's 3. 4, you get to the hospital and you have to go check in to triage. So now you're walking into another space, which is made to have sick people. If it's the middle of the night, you have to check into the ER. You have to go through the emergency. Yeah, if it's the middle. I did not know that. Yeah, unless it's like St. David's North or whatever here in Austin. But like most of the time you have to go through the emergency room if it's off call hours.
I also heard they like make you wait and stuff.
You have to go to triage. Yeah. So you don't get to just like show up at the hospital with your bag and go right into the labor and delivery room and sit and begin labor. That's not how it happens.
Yeah.
So then you show up and you go to triage. So to get to triage, you have to answer a series of questions. So you have to talk to a nurse, a stranger. Oh, wow. That's like 4 or 5. So you're entering a new strange place. You're talking to strangers. You're answering questions. It's 6.
So baby's like, hey, mama's busy. I'm going to stay here.
So if you were having those intense, amazing contractions, guess what's going to happen? It's going to shut off. And now you have to get into your rational thinking human brain versus getting out of that and getting into your mammalian brain, right? So like if a deer is having a labor in the woods, somebody walks up on it, the labor hormones are going to stop. It's going to go somewhere else. Once it feels safe again, it'll start again. So most women, it'll slow down. And then once they get to the labor and delivery room, it can speed back up. But most of the time, they're in so much pain and they're just like, now I have access to the drugs. They get the drugs, then you have to speed it up. It's like down the word spiral, but we're already at 5. So then we go to triage. We get checked into triage, right? What if your OB is not the one that's on call? What if it's a different OB? Oh gosh, I don't know this obstetrician. And now I don't have the person that I've wanted. Well, or if you get your OB, cool. Well, your OB is going to want to do what? They're going to want to do a cervical check. They're going to make sure that you're in labor. So they're going to tell you whether you are or not in labor by inserting their hand into your vagina. So that's like 6, 7. That's two interventions alone. Like one, you're having somebody insert their hand in your vagina, which does not feel good when you're in labor. It's not your lover. It's not. And then another thing is it's them telling you how far along you are in labor. You could be at a 1 and you could be in transition, and I could break that down. So then you're seeking these numbers to tell you how far along you are in labor. That gets in your head. What if you're like laboring so hard and they check you and they're like, oh, well, you're only at a 1. I think you should go back home. I don't think you're in labor. And you are in labor. They do that all the time in the hospital. If you're not like at a 4, they won't check you in. Or you can sit in triage. You can stay here until you're far enough along to where we think you go into the room. So, you know, you're in a triage room, and usually in triage, you're just separated by drapes with other women who are in labor.
Yeah.
So you're, you know, it's down the spiral. You know what I mean? Like that. I mean, that's like 8. And then you get into a labor and delivery nurse, and now you have a new team because you have nurses in triage, and now you have another team. So now it's, you know, you have a whole other group of strangers that are in your birth. So it's just, you're not able to relax and process. There's just so many interventions just to have a hospital birth. So when women say, I want a natural birth at a hospital, I say, you can have a natural vaginal birth unmedicated at a hospital. Sure. But you cannot have an undisturbed physiological birth at a hospital.
Are those 2 different things?
2 totally different things. Undisturbed physiological birth is the way God created us. It's not letting anything disrupt us. From the second labor hormones begin, we ride it. We stay comfortable. We stay in our home, surrounded by people that we love, whether it's, we could invite our best friends and our sisters and our husband. You can have multiple people at your birth, but you know them. Yeah. You're comfortable with them. That's your team, your doula, your midwife, whoever. These are people you've met and you've become, you know, just sisterhood with, right? And your husband, the natural oxytocin giver, right? That's who made baby with you. That should bring baby with you, right? And so, you know, it's really hard for the husband also to stay in the role that he needs to stay in once you get to the hospital. Because when you get to the hospital, you both are looking to the doctors and the nurses to tell you what to do and what's going on. And the husband, is trying to advocate for you, but he's being told like, no, you don't see this every day like we do, you know.
No
and then,
uterus, no opinion.
Exactly. Please just go smoke a cigar in the lounge with the other dads, and we'll bring you in once the baby's born. Right? It's kind of that's how the husbands are treated in hospitals.
Back in the day when midwifery was still very like the only way to do birth, like that was also like you would give birth within a women's community.
Totally.
Right? Usually,
yeah.
Women kind of were separated.
They would shove the men out.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? I've done births where I know that mom and husband have been really at each other's throats, you know, and like mom has confided.
Maybe it's for the better.
Totally. And so I'm kind of like, you know what? Like, why don't you go take a nap in the guest room? And when she's there, I'll call you back. You know what I mean? Because sometimes that's what it is. It's just like we've been at each other's throats for, you know, and like I'm afraid he's going to say something to me in the moment, but it's like, you can tell, like, if he brings oxytocin, if he makes the oxytocin flow, or if he's annoying her. Like, if you, I did Anya's birth with her son on my podcast, and she talks about how, like, he was annoying her. So she was like, get out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, you can kind of tell, like, is he helping the oxytocin flow, or is he kind of inhibiting it because he's annoying her, or he's saying things, or he's, you know what I mean? And so it's not like kick husband out. It's just kind of like, give him something else to do. Like, hey, can you go get us some water? Or, hey, can you make snacks? Or giving him a purpose, because men need purpose. Men need something to do. My husband 100%. In my home birth was taking off the doors to make space for everybody. Literally, that's what he started doing. He was like, I don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden he's got the power drill and he's like taking the doors off. He's like, I just feel like we need more room, you know?
So sweet.
Yeah. But I mean, but they also were telling me that, like, cause I had my doula massaging me, and I had the midwife assistant who is this indigenous, like, traditional midwife. She's incredible. And she was massaging me, and they both are amazing. You know, they were both incredible, but they said there was something in your face when your husband would touch you. Like, there was a different look. Like, I didn't even know who was touching me. Like, they would all just take turns massaging me. But when he would touch me, it was almost like my body knew, like, that's my lover. That's the one that created this baby with me. And so, yeah, I mean, we just went off on a whole tangent from the,
I love
you
it.
know,
A little more positivity in there.
Totally. It's just, you know, we shouldn't be made to fear the pain in birth. Yeah. We shouldn't have fear around birth in general. But if you're seeing a medical provider that is doing everything to bring up fears, then that's the wrong person to have on your team. You know, like a midwife isn't going to be sitting there telling you like, well, you're over 35, so this and this and this, and you're this and that. It's like, yeah, you don't think I know all these things? Like, tell me something positive.
Yeah.
Tell me some positive things, because that's where I come from as a doula. I work in somatics. So how we speak to our body, you know, if we're constantly telling ourselves like, I can't do this or I can't do that, guess what? You're not going to be able to do
100%.
that.
Yeah, 100%. I so agree with that.
Yeah.
But I actually had a client who was considered, I guess, like a old birther, whatever. They have like a horrible
Geriatric.
name. Yes, horrible.
I was so geriatric.
Really?
Yeah.
You were considered too? But I mean, she's like healthiest, like so amazing. Already had like 2 kids, and she had a horrible experience just because when she was in the hospital, they would monitor her every week and stuff. She went in the hospital. It's like, you have to be induced today. Like that's it. She's like, I feel great. Like baby's good. Like why? Like because you're old, pretty much. So anyway, they tried to induce her, and I think she said like, I'm gonna wait, and then she went into labor herself. And in the end, she said like no one was there to greet the baby. She's like, I was alone. There's like a nurse. She's like, we have to wait for the doctor. And it's like no one showed up. And there was like a midwife who was passing by in the hospital, and she delivered the baby.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh,
yes.
Considering how much they scared you into like you have to be like monitored all the time.
Yeah.
In the end, no one was kind of there, which is a little weird. So yeah, she was not happy. But in terms of, I mean, you have very strong opinion about hospital birth, obviously, because of, I guess, your own experience too, which I do want to ask you about. Anya told me a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was like fascinated. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty horrible.
Yeah.
But I wanted to become a doctor, a pediatric doctor myself back in the day. And like knowing myself, I wasn't it for the people. Like I wanted to be there to help, obviously to feel good, but also to help people. That's what I do now for my job as well. But I can't imagine myself being that. Like how do you think like doctors get corrupted in the system? Like why?
It's a few things, right? So do I think obstetricians are evil and bad? No, not at all. I think, no, I don't. I don't think they are at all. I think they are brainwashed. They're brainwashed in school. They're taught how to be surgeons. They're taught that birth is an event that needs to be managed, monitored, and saved. And if they're not there, that's selfish and that's dangerous for a woman to do it without an obstetrician.
But I heard they only show up when the baby is like literally there. So pretty much with the nurse the whole time.
But they're being monitored. You're being you have a thing strapped around your belly that's listening to the baby and apparently listening to your contractions, which is so false. It doesn't
listening to contractions?
You know, feeling for your tightness. Like it's all BS. It's stupid. And they want to like, we want your contractions 2 to 3 minutes apart. It's like, it's all managed. And so it's a little bit of they're brainwashed from school. They've never, ever, ever witnessed an undisturbed physiological birth, because if they had, they wouldn't be doing what they do.
Oh, wow.
There's no way. There's no way. Even the midwives in the hospital, they don't believe in undisturbed physiological birth. And I don't understand why they're calling themselves midwives. They're certified nurse midwives, and they are still doing hospital birth, which means that birth is already disturbed going to the hospital. You know that by monitoring baby, doesn't tell you anything. When you're continuously fetal monitoring a baby, it actually is disturbing the mother. You know that birth should not be rushed or forced. And yet these midwives at the hospital are still doing that. So it's not obstetrician and it's not midwife, it's hospital protocol. And the hospital is a business.
Yeah.
It's all a business. Every cervical check is hundreds of dollars. The Pitocin is thousands of dollars. Everything is a business. And so if you're just leaving a mother to labor without the Doppler and all the, without the monitor and all the things, to help labor along, because truthfully, that's how women would have a baby. You're going to have to give up having a room available to her for 2 to 3 days in the hospital, because it's going to be a little slower of a process, because she's going to be disrupted, by strangers and such. But they're not willing. I mean, the hospitals used to do elective inductions. They don't do elective inductions anymore. Why? Because they take 2 to 3 days. And they don't have 2 to 3 days to rent out a hospital room. So they just don't do that anymore. They'll just tell a mom, like, time to get induced. And they go full force. And then they end up in C-section. Because
that's the story.
Girl, it's wild
in New York,
right now.
In New York, it's 90% of people.
Oh, yeah.
Same story.
So that 30% number, like 30% of women, that's an average. That's average. You take California, you take New York, you take these hospital pharma-run states. Boop. I'm talking 70, 80% C-section rate.
It's crazy.
It's horrible. And, you know, there's some hospitals in Austin that are like
Same
that
way.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. I don't want to name it.
Anya was telling me about one doctor. I was like, oh, that sounds so creepy. I'm not going to say name. But
Yeah, no, I know who it is because we talked about it on our Anya and I sat down for 3 hours and we discussed. And I was like, is it that one? And she was like, yup. And I was like,
so if you want all the tea, go to Amy's podcast.
Yeah, you don't even have to say the name. I know exactly who he is.
I would love to have him just to ask him like why and what.
But he would. It's literally like trying to break through to someone who still fully believes that medicine is everything, right? It'd be like a homeopath talking to it's 2 languages.
Yeah.
And it has to do with breaking down the fear. Like they're just so fearful. They think that we are crazy hippie people for doing this at home unassisted, but they don't see what I see.
Yeah.
They only see the transfers. But what caused that transfer? 90
intervention.
Oh, girl, 90. I would say probably 97% of home birth transfer is exhaustion.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's it.
That's
Mom's
true.
tired and she needs the epidural to sleep.
100%. That's actually a very common story for why I got an epidural. Yeah,
97%.
So
I would say.
What would you say you should do in this situation? So you are obviously been laboring home for like hours and hours and hours. You're exhausted.
Yeah. So a lot of that is from the fear. It's from a mom who's still stuck in fear. Because if you're stuck in fear when you go into labor, you are too focused on the timing and you're too focused on progressing and you're too focused on what's happening. Is this normal? Is this normal? And you're not able to actually like understand true physiological birth, which is ebb and flow. It's just ebb and flow. You can have 5-minute apart contractions and they can be going for 10 hours. And then all of a sudden everything stops for like 2 to 3 hours. And it's so normal. And that's your body and that's your baby being like, hey, yo, it's time to take a nap.
Oh, that's so cool.
And women that trust and take my workshop and do the classes with me, they go right to sleep. And I specialize as a doula. Like I do massage, I'll do like oils, and I'll just like meditation music, like head scalp massage, whatever can help them relax. And they'll be snoring, like straight up snoring in the middle of transition, like right before they start pushing the baby out. Just
who would think nature would think of these things?
But I always say sleep is everything in labor. It's not about bouncing on the ball. It's not even movement and mindfulness, like being in touch with your body, and sleep and hydration and nutrition, constantly just snacking, giving yourselves like energy, but like nutrients, you know, but sleep is like boop, boop. It's up there with hydration. Because I tell people all the time, like you cannot get scared if your contractions stop. And what do they do in the hospital? They focus on the timing of your contractions. So when your body would naturally like ebb and flow and your contractions will slow down, that's the baby wanting to sleep. When the baby's like, I've been working out this whole time, I need a rest. I mean,
and babies, the hospital's considered like,
babies have to sleep.
And we have to
babies have to sleep too. Mom has to sleep and a baby has to sleep. A baby's been up for 10 hours, like literally getting squeezed and moving, you know, baby's got to sleep.
I never thought
and
that.
what does
That's
the hospital do when the baby's trying to take a nap? Pitocin. What does Pitocin do? It doesn't do what oxytocin does. It starts jamming the uterus like boom, boom, boom. And then the baby's like, and now you've cut off the natural oxytocin flow. So what happens when you cut off natural oxytocin to the body? You've cut off the endorphins that go with that natural oxytocin to help with the pain. And then what happens? You start experiencing more pain because you're like, your body's like, this isn't natural. This isn't that natural oxytocin. So now you're kind of,
so it is more painful.
Oh, Pitocin is 1,000 times more painful than natural oxytocin contractions. It's completely different. It forces your uterus to like do this. You're not getting like this in between contractions. You get this like flow of like endorphins that help you and like keep you happy. And oxytocin is like, and you're having a synthetic version of that. Like you're not getting the like orgasmic feel that you get from real oxytocin. You're just getting the effect, which is causing the uterus to contract, but you're not getting the full effect of the natural hormone. So what happens is we're not thinking about baby in that. All we're thinking about, let's speed this up. Let's get the baby out. So what happens when you start to give Pitocin, the baby gets stressed out because the baby's like, imagine being super exhausted and someone's just like pulling you with a rope. Like, come on, keep running, keep running, keep running. Your heart rate would be like, look, I need a rest. So I also did a podcast episode with Gina Mundy, who is a lawyer for birth cases, for death, maternal and fetal death. And she said in every single case.
Wait, how often does that happen?
With Pitocin?
Wait, really?
I mean,
we kind of passed that at this
girl,
point.
no, we are on the lowest. We're like in the lowest of the low. We're like in the lowest 5 in the whole world as far as like, or well, the highest, so to speak, but lowest as far as like safeness of maternal and fetal death. The United States, a country that prides themselves on like the best healthcare system, we are on the worst, some of the worst maternal and fetal mortality outcomes. And it's because we are so medicalized. Like who are the best? France, Sweden, Netherlands. What do? UK, they use midwifery. Midwives are like all in their hospital system. They only call the obstetrician in when the obstetrician's needed, which should be less. But again, if you're birthing in a hospital, it's like, you know what I mean? Like if everybody had their own midwife for a home birth, you would see a 4%, 3% C-section rate again, but I digress. But it's seriously, but yeah, it's really, really just going back to everything. It's really sad what's happening because it is. And Gina said in all of her cases, every single one, Pitocin.
Wow. That's crazy. So
that's a 21-year case study.
If we have such a statistic, why are there no...
And you know what she said wasn't present in any of those? A doula. She says
kind of like at the...
She says if a doula ever stepped foot into a birth, they would be a key witness and the outcomes would have been drastically different. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
Yeah. It's literally always Pitocin. So if my moms do transfer to the hospital, the reason I don't have emergency C-section is because I keep them out of Pitocin. I mean, as a doula, I'm not supposed to do medical stuff, but like, that's why I don't even think I want to call myself a doula anymore because a doula, the term doula, I have to adhere to the medical provider. I don't give you medical advice. They do. You know what I mean? Yes. But it's like, no, if somebody's pushing Pitocin on you, I'm going to tell you, you don't need Pitocin. Like we can do this. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's been successful even for my moms who transfer, you know, but I haven't had, minus the one recently, but she had to get induced for preeclampsia, which I still, looking back, I'm like, she didn't need to get but I haven't had a transfer in 19 months before that. Because I started getting into the somatic work and breaking down the fear in my clients from the second they hire me. Because I started seeing, why are these moms transferring? Why are these moms choosing hospital? Why are these moms choosing a birth center? And underlying it always was fear. There was 100%. Fear of something. And so I started...
Also of unknown.
Totally.
You're kind of like, I have no idea what's about to happen.
Totally.
And we're so used to like asking the doctors, like, what is wrong with me? So I totally understand why those women might want to do a hospital birth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if even birth center, I'll break that down. I don't do birth center anymore.
I heard from Anya that not that great.
They're all, it's What is a birth center? Why are you going to a birth? What do you have to do to get to a birth center? You have to intervene. You have to time your contractions. You have to get to the birth center. They have to make sure that you're far enough along to stay at the birth center. And if you're not progressively laboring like they want you to, they're going to send you back home. They're going to give you Benadryl.
So they have the same protocols pretty much?
Same protocols.
Okay. So what is the difference between a hospital and a birth center, I guess?
A birth center, you're under midwifery care, so you're not going to get Pitocin.
Oh, okay.
You're not going to have an epidural.
It's kind of like a
You're
middle
not gonna,
ground.
Yeah, it's just kind of, I mean, you'll be able to get in the tub and labor. There's like, it's a middle ground between a hospital and a home birth. So, but again, I won't take birth center births. Why? Because those women still have fear. And if they worked with me for 6 weeks, they would choose home birth.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Damn.
Takes me 6 weeks.
That's actually a short time, I feel like, to
Totally.
get rid of such big fears.
Yep.
All right.
6
Damn.
weeks. I can take somebody who is dead set on a hospital birth and their partner. Because a lot of the times the mom will come to me and be like, I want to do it, but my husband is like, no.
Why? Because he feels like the stress of being there, and if anything happens.
The men aren't as in tuned with the process of birth as we are. As,
I feel like they're constantly pushed out of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
But like, it just depends, is their dad a doctor? Is there, then you have to deal with the in-laws, and you have to deal with your own parents' birth trauma stories. Cause in the 70s, 80s, 90s, they were traumatized big time. You know what I mean? So then it's like, you're just having to break down birth trauma stories that you've heard. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I'll be like, let's talk about the scariest birth story that your best friend told you. And I can break it down, and you can text her and ask her questions. And I guarantee what I'm saying, she's going to be like, yep, that happened, that happened, that happened. I can hear the first 5 minutes of a birth story and complete it for the mother. Literally. I can be like, you don't even have to finish. I know exactly what happened. And they'll sit there and go like jaw open, like, oh my gosh. Cause at this point, I've broken down at least 150 birth stories and helped women rewrite it.
There's obviously a system and patterns.
Totally. There's a pattern, and there's a way that I kind of work like somatically, and we'll tap and tune into the body, and I can see when a woman's being triggered. We'll stop, we'll regulate the nervous system, we'll keep going. But through that, it's kind of like when someone comes out of an abusive relationship with a guy and then like they just didn't see everything that was going on. And then like a year later, they're able to like kind of go back and revisit and talk about the relationship and with somebody who's able to be like, well, don't you remember when they did or said this to you? And you're like, oh, I totally forgot.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good analogy to understand.
You know what I mean? It's like, then you're like, oh my gosh, I like let myself be totally abused. Like, it wasn't that the relationship fell apart. It was that I allowed all of this stuff to happen because I was afraid of leaving. I was afraid of this. Insert X, Y, and Z. But as human beings, when we allow other people to control anything in our life, we're offsetting our autonomy.
100%.
And when we do that, then we can't tune into what our body is saying to us. And if we really were comfortable and tuned into our body and our nervous system, we would know that an abusive man, we don't need to be around anymore. We would listen to that. We would leave. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing in birth. Somebody comes in and it's like, okay, let's go ahead and check you, It's like, that's literally like, let me warm up my hands so I can feel the size of this baby on your bed. It's like, I don't want to be touched right now. That's what if you were listening to your body, you would say, no, can we just like not touch me right now? Can you just like sit here, be quiet, kind of look at the monitor if that's what you want to do. But like, I don't want to be touched. Right. But we go into fawn mode when we get around our providers, even women in home birth with their midwives. They don't want to be bad clients. They don't want to be bad patients.
Difficult.
Yeah, you don't want to be difficult. So you go into this like fawn mode. You're like, well, okay, if you think I should drink the castor oil smoothie.
Oh no.
It literally, that's what happens. I can break down birth trauma stories with midwives too. It's all about offsetting your autonomy and not being in tune with your body and breaking down fears. Because if you break down fear, man, you're powerful. If you're not afraid of anything, and you trust your body and you trust what God gave you, woo, that's a woman that you don't want to mess with, because
that's a huge, I just like trying to imagine, like, that's a huge thing that you have to overcome. Just like trust in yourself within something you have no idea.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like that's crazy.
Those free birth moms, woo, they're on another level. Not having anybody with you, not listening to baby during labor, not knowing what position baby's in, like nothing. They're just doing it and they're trusting God. I helped a mom free birth via WhatsApp in the UK.
Oh.
Yeah, I had been breaking down her fear and she had 3 C-sections.
Oh, wow.
She had her 4th one with a midwife in the hospital in the UK, a VBAC. But they abused her. They like episiotomied her, forceps, vacuum. Like they did a lot of abuse. They weren't listening to her. She was like crying and screaming like, stop. You know, it was abuse. And so her 5th baby, she was like, I want to do it at home. And she reached out to me on Instagram. And I just felt this like call from God, like just help her, like help her. Don't charge her, just help her. And I just was like, let's talk. And she was 36 weeks. And she was like, at this point I have home birth midwives, but they work with the hospital because that's how they are in the UK. And she's like, and they've been like slowly like gaslighting me. Like, we're going to have to listen every 15 minutes and like all these things. And I was like, that just doesn't. And in my mind, I kept thinking like, they're going to flake on her. They're going to be like, hey, no one's available. Like, go to the hospital. We'll meet you there. You know what I mean? And like, she started feeling it too. And I was like, let's talk. And so we got on Zoom and she like went to this like restaurant by herself because she has 4 kids at home, went to a restaurant in the back corner and she was sitting there in this like quiet little back corner with her like phone on. And we were Zooming. I was like, let's just talk about free birth. Like, let's talk about like, if you decide that this is what you want to do, if you want just a wise woman, like on the phone with you to just guide you through and tell you like everything that's happening is normal, like I'll be here for you. And she was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You know? And sure enough, the day came and she was like, well, my water just broke. And the midwives just told me that nobody's coming for another 12 hours. And I said, okay, well, we talked about this, so let's do it. And she's a very Christian woman. And like, thankfully, it was a very quick birth. It was like 5-6 hours. Oh, wow. And the whole time she was just, the baby's not moving. Is something wrong, you think? And I'm like, no, we're not going to go there. Like you have to, if you're going to do this, you have to trust that God has you and that this is it. You're going to do it. And sure enough, she has that baby and like, she's like, she's not making any noise. And I'm like, she's perfect. She's pink. She's looking around. And again, in the hospital, they want them to, you know, they don't have to.
Really?
Some babies like come into their bodies and it takes them a minute because they're getting their oxygen and blood from the cord. So the first
in the hospital, they pretty much cut it right away, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
They deprive the baby of oxygen. So if a baby comes out like not breathing and sometimes it takes them a while to come into their body, you know, it's a whole thing. And so they'll cut the cord. And so now the baby's not getting oxygen. Now they really need to be resuscitated.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a beautiful experience. And it kind of even deepened my faith in like, wow, like there was a part that tested my fear. And I understand like where midwives, when they come to birth as the medical professional, where their fear comes from. You know what I mean?
Because that fears drives them, like that ego that to come out to protect you from that fear of not doing something wrong.
They have a license on the line and they also have to like study under their, they do like an apprenticeship. They study under midwives and maybe they've witnessed trauma, but they also have to break down that they've witnessed trauma because it was a midwife that was doing things and messing with the birth, breaking the water, take the castor oil, inducing a mom because she's 41 and 6 and about to be 42. Anya is really the only midwife, in my opinion, that like understands undisturbed birth because she did it herself. She free birthed her own kid. Yeah. And I truly believe with how we birth our own babies is how we are as practitioners. So if you experienced a lot of birth trauma, like, well, I mean, unless you can break it down, because I experienced birth trauma with my first and I was like, no, I am not going to let a mom be taken advantage of. I was like the total opposite. I was like major protector in birth, but also in that I had to break that down as a doula. I had to be like, you know what? This is the woman's, I can't protect her from anything. I can empower her, I can educate her, and I can break down her fear, and then she does the work. And I'm there to just support it. And so that's where I've gotten full circle today as a doula. It's like, I'm not there to save you. Yeah. You can hire me as your doula, but I'm not going to save you. You have to save yourself. Yeah. And I'm there to just hold that space and massage you and head massage you, put you to sleep, make you feel good, reassure you that everything that's happening is normal so that you can stay in that cortisol free zone and you can just have that baby in pure oxytocin bliss. Yeah.
Oh. Wait, so that actually raises a question. I was talking with my best friend. She had 2 babies in New York, where midwifery is not a thing. She actually tried to find a midwife because she wanted to try something more like natural, especially for the second one.
Yeah.
And she said she felt exactly the same as with the hospital. All the same procedures, like all the same vibes. She's like, well, might as well, like insurance covers the hospital, do it with the hospital. But what made you choose a hospital birth for you first?
Oh, I didn't. It was birth center.
Oh.
It was a birth center transfer because I was gaslit throughout my entire pregnancy. I break it down a lot on my podcast with both of my babies' birth stories, and that's an important thing is like understanding what happened. Because I did end up in an emergency, nothing is ever an emergency, C-section with my first. Well, so basically long story short, I was 37 when I was pregnant with my first. So I was already geriatric, right?
Wait, what was the age?
35. Usually if you're
that's
over...
That's going to be me.
Girl, I help women into their late 40s. Trust me, you're not geriatric. It's literally just like... How confident are you in your body? That's it. Yeah. You could be 60 years old and have a baby. I don't care. If your ovaries are still working, you're fine. But I was already geriatric. And then I was it starts with the 20-week anatomy scan, usually the gaslighting and the fear. So that's where everything kind of starts is like, oh, baby's measuring big, or, oh, baby's measuring small, or, oh, baby might have like this or this or this or this or this. And you're trusting a machine. So that's where our trust in the machine is. It's like, or you're growing a baby like the perfect size that you're supposed to grow a baby. You know what I mean? And so it usually starts there, which for me, it was, oh, she's measuring 2 weeks ahead. She just might be a bigger baby.
Wait, why would you say that? They have spurs of like growth and like, I heard that machine only like a pound off, which is huge. 2
pounds sometimes.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, look, if you're educated and empowered, you understand that like, the machine means nothing. But if you're the average 98, 99% of the people that are choosing hospital birth, you're not necessarily empowered and educated because you're choosing a hospital birth because you have fear.
Like my mom did it, my grandma did it. Like insurance covers it. So there are a lot of like, it's the first time I probably was like, well, the hospital, what are my other options?
Yeah. But I mean, what is it like out of pocket? You're still paying money or unless you've met your deductible, but you're usually going to pay like $4,000 out of pocket, even if insurance covers the $15,000 of it, versus paying an extra $1,000 to a midwife. And then you have that's the misconception is home birth. People think, oh, you're just doing a crunchy nut. No, like a midwife orders labs, a midwife orders ultrasounds, a midwife is coming over and Dopplering you and baby and making sure your baby's growing and sounds good, listening to the heartbeat. And it's all done like in your home or at like a loving, beautiful office. And you're getting like hour-long prenatals and it's family centered. You can bring your toddlers and older siblings if you want to. Like you can't do that at an OB's office and you're getting 5 minutes because they might be in the middle of surgery and you have to wait there for an hour for them to come back and have a 5-minute appointment with you. So what is your insurance really covering?
That's a good point.
I mean, people will spend $50,000 on a wedding.
In America.
Or, you know what I mean? Or even $5,000.
Yeah. No, I
on
totally
a wedding.
Agree. Yeah. Yeah.
This is the birth of your child. This literally shapes who you are for the rest of your life. And I can say that with confidence. Like your nervous system, there's something that happens with the vagus nerve when you birth a baby. And if you're disturbed and dysregulated in that moment, you will continue to be disturbed and dysregulated until you can address what happened to you. And sometimes it's physical obstetric abuse or midwifery abuse that your body senses, like too many cervical checks or somebody like really messing with your vagina, but like you loved your birth experience, but like somehow your body just like remembers something, right? So like the body can remember trauma when the brain doesn't, right?
100%.
So that's why a lot of women are like, I loved my experience at the hospital. And I'm like, great. Like I love that. Like, I don't want to make you hate it, but if you're coming to me because you're saying that you feel dysregulated or you feel like you have depression or something, like, let's really break down your birth. And then in that, they'll be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that like in the moment after I had the baby and they took the baby to the warmer that like my body was like, give me my baby back. You know what I'm saying? Like there's things that happen in a beautiful hospital birth that I could still break down and be like, but it's not as cool as home birth, like your system, your nervous system, you're separated from baby. Midwives understand the mother-baby dyad. Like you're one. When the baby comes out, you're still treated as one client.
Yeah.
When the baby comes out in the hospital, you're two clients.
Yeah.
You know, pediatrician gets this one, the OB gets you. So it's just horrible. Anyways, I was at the birth center. It started with the gaslighting at my 20-week ultrasound, them telling me I had a big baby. Then at 26 weeks, I was forced to drink the glucola drink because I was essentially told, I was like, wait, I can't do the fresh test, or I can't do jelly beans, or I can't do orange juice. And they were like, no, you have to drink this drink. And I'm like, but I don't want to. That has chemicals in it. And they're like, it's the dye-free. They're like, if you want to, they essentially were like, if you want to birth at this birth center, you're going to drink this.
Oh, wow.
And I just, at that point, had already developed a relationship and an excitement for having a natural birth at a birth center that I was like, okay, drank it, almost passed out, like felt horrible. And that was the moment, I talk about it in my podcast, that was the moment that I feel like everything went downhill for me. Because my body, my pancreas reacted horribly. I do truly believe that I had a false positive in the gestational diabetes test, which is very, very common from drinking that stupid drink. And from that point on, I was then treated as geriatric and high risk. So that now I had to go see a maternal fetal medicine doctor. And then the maternal fetal medicine doctor was just constantly checking on baby, size of baby, because now they think I'm GD and they think the baby's developing too big for my pelvis. Like it's this whole, they like just gaslit me. So when I went into labor at the birth center,
what did you feel in the moment? Did you feel like, okay, I'm just like rolling with it?
Just rolling with it.
Did you always feel like that resistance?
I just kept saying like, I can do this. I can do this. I know I can do this. But like in the back of my head, I had tons of fear. I wasn't as somatically in tune with my body then. I just was ignoring all the signs. I was ignoring the gaslighting. I was just ignoring it. These women didn't care about me. They didn't really care about me. They knew that I was going to be a transfer. So what happens with birth centers is they take like 15 women a month because they know they're going to transfer at least 7 or 8. They know. So they know that they can't possibly deliver all 15. So then they like pick and choose which ones are going to really be my transfers. Yeah, it happens. And so I knew like my centering class, I had a centering class with all women that were due in the month of May that year. And there was 12 of us. And out of us 12, 6 of them were transfer and C-sections.
Damn.
That's 50%. 50% transfer, 50% C-section. And all of us had the same thing. It was prodromal labor, which is very common with a first-time mom, meaning labor started and we were taught at the birth center, same thing with the hospital. It's like, you want to progress that labor. You want to keep it going. So you want to bounce on balls, do some movement, all the things, you know what I mean? And if you can't go back to sleep, then you're going to, whatever, like you want to get to 5-1-1 or 4-1-1 where your contractions are 4 minutes apart, lasting for a minute and that for an hour. And so 3 o'clock in the morning, my labor started and I like, didn't want to wake my husband up, got in the bath. It didn't slow down. So I was like, okay, cool. All excited. Instead of just like going back to sleep and ignoring it, I was up all night trying to progress it. So what was I doing? I was angering my uterus. I was making myself.
In your nervous system, probably.
Yeah. I was making my contractions like even worse. And then 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I'm like, it's like, go to the birth center. I go to the birth center. Oh, you're only at a 3. We really want you to sleep and then come back when they get stronger. So they gave me a shot of Nubain in my butt, which is a narcotic. They say it's Benadryl, but it's Nubain. You can't shoot Benadryl into the butt. But they don't tell you that. It's not informed consent. They don't say like, hey, we're about to give you a narcotic that's going to knock you out.
What do you mean it's not informed consent?
I mean,
just do it.
Informed consent would be, we're going to give you a narcotic.
Yeah,
it's called Nubain.
Yeah.
This crosses the placenta. It's going to make baby tired and it's going to make you really tired, but it's going to knock you out. So you can go home and get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And then whenever you wake up to really strong contractions, because you and baby are back awake again, then come back. So that would be informed consent. No, they said, we're going to give you some Benadryl. We'll give you Benadryl. It'll help you sleep. Then they gave me a shot in my butt. I went home like,
that's insane.
Passed out. They do it all 6 of us.
That's insane.
All 6 of us.
I would not let anyone do that.
Same story. Then I got back there. My contractions were super intense. I had at that point. Now it's like on day. It was like actually like I slept and then I woke up and then I was like progressing again and then I was up all night laboring and then I got back at like noon on the 3rd day and I was like delirious at this point because I had a 4-hour Nubain nap in 3 days. And the midwife was like, well, let's just break your water. Breaks my water. And Adeline, my oldest, was like asynclitic.
Love that name.
Thank you. She was asynclitic. So when she broke the water, she fell into like a position like this instead of like this. So they use the water sac to get in a really great position, and then the water will break, and then baby will be in a nice position. I wasn't doing any spinning babies. I wasn't doing anything to help her. Now I know differently. There's a lot of things I could break down with my first birth that could have not ended in C-section, starting with not choosing a birth center. But you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And then ended up transferring to the hospital because I was so exhausted. Got to the hospital, was completely gaslit there, got the epidural, finally got like a 4-hour nap, woke up to them literally putting Pitocin in my line without asking. But it wasn't just, they like put a ton of Pitocin. I like got up to 20 units of Pitocin, which is very, very dangerous. Like that's like the max. At that point, they had cervical checked me so many times that my water was broken and they were cervical checking me. I got an infection. It's called choriostasis. So they had to give me a C-section.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was like my fever was like 104. So yeah, they had to give me a C-section. Adeline came out perfectly fine. Me, downhill after that, like almost died 3 times in the hospital afterwards. So,
oh my God.
But it was none of it was my body.
Yeah.
And me. It was all outsourcing
just overlapping.
Outsourcing everything and listening to them just gaslight me throughout my entire pregnancy. And so I thought I could do it, but really when I went into labor, I should have just like known what I know now, just like slept, done some inversions, helping her get in a better position, try to sleep some more, stay home, don't go to the birth center. You know what I mean? Just like, yeah,
wow.
It's a lot.
Damn.
So yeah, second time had my baby at home, second baby at 41. So talk about geriatric.
Everything went great. And
geriatric. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was amazing. It was awesome. It was like a high. Like I literally was totally not taking my own advice. And I was like out in my driveway, like showing all my neighbors literally like 4 hours after having her. They're like, can you just like go back? Did you not just have a baby? I was like, oh my God, look at, I did it. And they're just like, you're crazy. But it was such a high.
Wow.
It's a high. Like when you do it in your own power, there's no amount of heroin that can make you feel that good. Seriously. It's awesome. It's really awesome. And it heals a lot. Like if it's a redemptive birth, it heals that trauma from the first birth because you have that trust in your body again.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Like we should always trust our body. The world is made to make us not trust our instincts and trust our body, like literally, especially as women.
So if we were delivering babies back, ages ago, just like doing free birth or doing like a midwifery, what caused that shift into the medical world? It's just like, is it a business part of it, or is it just like women were too scared, or like what do you think caused that shift? I
mean, there's a lot. You could go look up Semmelweis, who was a obstetrician. He is actually so back in the day, the doctors would go work on cadavers, on dead people. Yep. And then they would literally go and work on laboring mothers, and they wouldn't wash, their hand washing wasn't a thing back then. Like nobody washed their hands. And so they would be touching dead people who probably died of some sort of disease or plague or
decaying
whatever.
Bodies is like full of stuff.
Yeah. Totally. And then they would insert their hand into a vagina. And so women and babies, like touching newborn babies and everything too. So the women and babies would die from infection, from bed fever is what they called it, after having a baby. So he discovered like whether he was doing it because back in the day it was more like superstitious and less like germ related, but he, maybe it was like to wash the bad humors away or whatever it was, like he just started washing with soap before delivering babies, and he had way better birth outcomes. So he goes and he presents this to his board of doctors, and they invite him to a dinner, and they take him to an insane asylum, and he dies in the insane asylum because this is
disturbed the system.
I mean, yeah. He's like, hey, if you just wash your hands, women and babies will stop dying. They literally like put him in an insane asylum. So it kind of starts there. It starts with like, hygiene. Like hygiene.
Well, midwives were called like dirty, like as Anya said, like dirty hands and all that.
Yeah. But hygiene should have changed birth, but then they started
trying things
saying that women were suffering in childbirth. So then it was like this whole, like, back to the beginning, how do I end the suffering? How do I end the pain? And then through doing that was actually causing a lot more. And it's like, then they're creating instruments and episiotomies and all of these things. Right. And it was causing horrible birth outcomes. So like, then they were creating, it's called iatrogenic care. They were creating the problems that they were then having to save. Yep. And it's just the history of obstetrics. If you just go back and look at the history of obstetrics, it's horrible. Do I think obstetricians are evil? No. I just think they are taught something in medical school that is not right.
Yeah.
It's not correct. It's birth is a physiological event. And like, they're literally like maternal fetal medicine doctors. All they know is the bad. That's all they know.
Oh, pathology.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with obstetricians. They don't see undisturbed physiological birth because by the second a mom gets to the hospital, she's already disrupted her birth. So they've never witnessed that. Dr. Stu from Birthing Instincts, Dr. Stuart Fischbein, he's incredible. He was an practicing obstetrician for a long time at Kaiser. And he was friends with midwives. And then he went and he was just like talking to midwives and they're like, oh, well, we do it this way. And he's like, well, that sounds better. And then he would like go witness home birth and he'd be like, I don't want to keep doing this anymore.
It takes one critical thinker.
And so, so he left the hospital world as an obstetrician and now he is an obstetrician that does home birth, twins and breech because they're variations of normal. You can have a baby breech. It's not any more dangerous than a vaginal birth. You just have to have a practitioner that understands the cardinal movement. So if a baby's chin or something gets stuck, they know how to maneuver that. But then there's women that free birth breech babies all the time. They don't need somebody there, So is that a fear that I say that have somebody there who understands? No, do it on your own. I'm constantly breaking down my own fears.
Oh, my client did it on her. I think she's friend Christina.
Yeah.
Christina. Yeah. She did her 4th, I think, free birth. And she's like the best experience ever. She said. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know anybody who free births and like has that outcome and that doesn't say like that was the greatest thing of I could die tomorrow and that was the greatest thing ever. Literally. Like even mine wasn't a free birth, but it was a full autonomous birth with a midwife. Like my midwives knew not to pressure me into anything. They let me ask, can you cervical check me? Can you see where I'm at? But even then that was a year ago. Even now, if I were to have that baby now, I would have done it without any cervical checks or anything because I've broken that down. Like why did I need to see where I was at? I didn't need to see where I was at.
I love that. Wow.
Because what are we doing when we're getting cervical checks? We're trying to see where we're at in labor. I've seen women go from a 1 to a 10 in 45 minutes.
100%. Yeah.
So it gets in our head when we hear we're at a 1 and then it's like, oh my gosh, I still got like at least another 12 hours. You've just messed with the whole.
Yeah.
You've messed
with. When Dr. Sue had a client in New York, she was 41 week and like 2 days. And she came to me, she's like, they're going to induce me like on Wednesday. It was like a day after. And she's like, I don't want to be induced. Like, oh, I'm so scared. So, and she's like, I have like no progression, baby's high up, no dilation. What do we do? We did a couple of points. It's very, very like with the body, nothing going to push anything. And I think it was mostly her being in the dark and relaxed that did the thing. A lot of my reduction, that's a big secret. Just getting them in the dark, quiet room and I'll just like touch them.
Yes.
Honestly, I think that works even better than the acupressure itself. But anyway, she had the baby the same night.
Girl, my client right now that's over 41 weeks, just trying to distract and go in here and go in there and go in here and go in there and walking this baby out. And I want to just be like, can we just put some meditation music on? I'll just do some like bladder points or, and maybe give you some massage and just have you be in the dark with some clary sage and see if that does it. But again, it's like, I'm not trying to induce anything, but also sometimes when you're doing too much towards the end of pregnancy or you're trying to walk this baby out and it's like sometimes the baby is trying to teach you to just like go inward
100%.
and just stop and be present with yourself. Because I think that's a thing too, is like the women, especially that go past the due date, they have all this like, and it's like, that's cool. Like you're just gestating a little longer. That's normal. That's totally normal. Like there's women that go to 44 or 45 weeks.
My
like,
mom had a solid 43 weeks. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, to me, that's normal. That's just like, there was a man in the 1700s that created due dates. Why do we believe what he said? Literally everything in the world, in everything that we use as far as like gestating a baby is based off of this one man who said that a due date is usually 40 weeks. So anything from 37, everything from 37 to 42 is normal.
Yeah.
And anything before that is premature. There's 35-week babies that come that are perfectly healthy. And then there's 45-week babies that come that are perfectly healthy. What are we doing messing with any of that? Like you can check on the baby at 35 weeks. Is it breathing? Is it okay? Baby looks pink and good. We don't have to rush them to the NICU just because they're 37. Like, you know, keep baby on mom. Like the NICU is a whole other topic. It's like they kidnap babies. It's horrible. It's horrible.
That's interesting. I never even thought that would be a problem because NICU is pretty much like ICU for babies, right? So
yep, but they take babies unnecessarily.
Oh, really?
1,000%. And then they don't give them back to mom when mom is like, baby looks healthy. Can I have her and take her home? No. Needs to stay a couple more. Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. I mean, the NICU is definitely needed, just like sometimes obstetricians are needed. But do I believe that they get $30,000 a day from the insurance company for keeping your baby in the NICU? Yeah. When they could have released your baby on day 2 back to you to go home because baby was fine, no breathing episodes. But couldn't they also do a CPAP and monitor baby on while baby's on you?
Skin to skin, yeah.
Like baby's just sitting in a box hooked to monitors on a wall, and there's a bunch of them, and the nurse is in there. Why can't they do the same thing on mom? I mean, I understand like the preemies, you know, but I'm talking about like the babies that come out with issues that need to be monitored. There's not somebody constantly holding them, watching them. They put them in a box on a CPAP, and when the
probably easier
when the beep 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 when the alarm goes off, they check on baby. Can they do the same thing and keep baby with mom? Keep baby in the room with mom?
Well, no, American system's probably like a liability.
Well, I can tell you.
Liability.
I'm just saying. In the Netherlands, that's what they do.
What?
They let mom. Yeah, they let mom have baby 24 hours a day. It's awesome. Yeah, one of my moms went to the Netherlands and had her baby premature at 32 weeks. And she stayed in the Netherlands with the baby, but the NICU was amazing there. Amazing. Way different than the United States. So I was like, maybe God had you there on vacation for that. Yeah. Because her experience was way different than the United States. So
that's good.
Yeah. Well, I want to let you get to your question. I could go off and off and off on birth.
Like
I could literally go off on birth for like 5 hours.
Okay, we have a couple of questions, but sorry. I guess we talked about that. There's a question, I don't know if you want to answer that, but what do you think doctors and nurses can do to better support women and prevent birth trauma? So if like woman still wants to do hospital birth, but like what can we like a little tweak in the system, maybe from just like even like a personal person who's a nurse, like what she can do to support women? Nothing.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Because they're married to the system. They have to do things by protocol. So even if an obstetrician is like, I really don't want to push Pitocin and I want to let this mom keep laboring, if the woman hasn't quote unquote made progress in a certain amount of hours and is, you know, getting the cervical checks because that's the protocol. If you're going to sit here in our room, we have to do that, you know, and you don't have to say yes to you can say no to everything at the hospital. They're going to, oh yeah, you don't have to get cervical checked or anything, but
it's not going to happen like with your drink and like, you know, you can labor here if you don't drink that.
I mean, I feel like it's changed a little bit to where people can say, I want to do the fresh test, and they'll allow the fresh test. And the obstetrician, some of them might not though. So, I mean, at that point it's bye, I'll get a different provider. Right. But if you're in labor, if you're in the hospital already and you don't want a cervical check, you can I mean, I do it all the time with my clients. I'm like, no, she's good. We don't need a cervical check. She's good. Because cervical checks will cause swelling, infection, all the things. And then it gets in the client's head, and then it gives the doctor ammo. Because if they're just watching you and they don't know where you're at, but if you're like having intense labor and then they are able to put their hand inside of you and see that you're only at a 2, they can push that Pitocin on you because they're like, you're not progressing. These contractions aren't doing anything. And somatically, they're telling the mom, you're not in labor. Your contractions aren't doing anything. Whereas at home, a midwife, even if she checks a mom, probably isn't going to tell her she's at a 2. She's just going to say, you're good. You're laboring. That's for sure. You're in labor. I can tell you that, you know, or something nice, positive, hopefully, you know, but they're not going to be like, you're right there. You know, they're just going to be like, you're in labor. So like, let's just keep going. Like, I know Anya will never tell a number, but Anya also doesn't cervical check. She only does it if the mom asks for it. Yeah. But hopefully with Anya and I working as a team now, I can break down all those fears so that by the time we get into birth, the mom doesn't want a cervical check because she understands that getting that. It's so again, there could be a really good obstetrician, but they're married to that protocol of that hospital. Yeah. So they have to kind of do that or they'll get fired.
To change, they have to know there's a problem, but they do not know. Pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, it's like a pediatrician that is seeing the problem with vaccines. Are they going to stop giving vaccines to kids? No, because they get paid by the CDC for every vaccine that they give. You know what I'm saying?
Do I guess their own practice, maybe something like that.
Or if an OB, like Dr. Stu, who I talked about, he had his own practice. He didn't work for the hospital. So he would show up at the hospital, he'd deliver his client and go home. So he got to practice the way he wanted to. And so he had better outcomes. He still did C-sections, but he talks about a lot of the times I probably did some unnecessary C-sections.
Just out of your own fear.
Totally.
Probably. Yeah.
So a lot of it is unlearning. Like the labor and delivery nurses, I would highly suggest if you're a labor and delivery nurse, find a doula friend or a midwife friend and see if the mother client is okay with you just coming and sitting in the corner and just being witness to an undisturbed physiological birth and just kind of seeing what that looks like, to unlearn, because a lot of the L&D nurses are just regurgitating and repeating what they hear the OBs say. Like I see it all the time, like a nurse that's like probably barely 20 years old. And she's sitting there like telling a mother things that an OB would say. And I'm like, where did you learn that? That is completely false. Have you even taken childbirth? Do you know can I give you a physiological birth? Can I teach you really quick how our bodies work? Like, cause you're completely lying and gaslighting moms. And I don't know how many other women that they're telling that to. There's great L&D nurses. And then there's L&D nurses that literally have only learned from bad OBs. Right? So how do we change the system? Get out of the system and go witness physiological birth. It's kind of like going and doing ayahuasca. Once you go do ayahuasca, you can't come back and look at everything the same. Your blinders are taken off. Literally, I did ayahuasca before I got pregnant with my first, and that's what I saw birth. I saw what I'm doing now. I saw myself. It was like an army of women. It looked like Woodstock when I was like tripping. It was literally just an army of women, and they were all holding babies, and they were just looking at me. And I was on this stage, and I was talking to, it was like, ooh, that looks like Blair.
Opa, someone's delivering.
Well, you know, she could be responding for my text this morning. I'll look in a minute. But I literally was.
You can look if you want.
Okay. I literally was like, it was like at Woodstock. I was on stage, and it was a sea of women, and they were all holding their babies, and they were all smiling at me. And I was like, literally, like I didn't want kids. I was 37 or 36, about to turn 37. I didn't want kids. I'd been with my husband now for 7 years, and we had talked about how like we were just going to travel the world and like not have babies and whatever. And like, he was okay with me not wanting kids. I woke up from the trip, and I was like, oh, I don't know what that meant, but my womb, I like started my period 8 days early. It was like she cleared, the grandmother, the medicine, cleared something out of me that had been just trapped in my womb space. I don't know if it was like energy of past lovers or whatever, but I was like, my clock turned on and I was like, I want to get pregnant. And looking back, I know that I had the birth that I had with Adeline so that I could be the doula and the educator that I am today. Because if I had had like this 5-hour like, birth center Zen birth, I wouldn't know how to teach people how to break down fear.
Yeah.
Because some women's bodies do just open up like flowers and they have these incredible, amazing births. And those are usually like the pain-free hypnobirthing moms, like, right? But not everybody's body works like that. There's generational trauma. There's, tightness in our pelvic floor. There's different things that we have to break down, and every birth and every baby is different. And so if you can just break down the fear, you can actually enjoy the process while experiencing pain. It's okay. It's like getting a massage and getting a knot out of your system when the massage therapist just hits that knot and you're like, oh, that hurts, but oh, that feels so good. Because it's doing something. Yeah. It's relieving that like whatever's there that's trapped, right? So you're able to embrace the pain while also experiencing pleasure, right? That's orgasmic birth. It's not having a physical orgasm while you give birth. Yep. It's enjoying the pain and the pleasure at the same time.
That's what life is.
That is what life is. That's what birth is. That's what all of it is.
Is she in labor?
Oh my gosh, this is so funny.
Did she have a baby already?
No, that was Anya texting me. Oh, I love it so much. Oh my God, she's amazing. Oh, this is so fun. I was like, it's like a long text, but like, I really genuinely love that I found a midwife in Austin that I know I can fully just relax in birth with. Because in the hospital, the reason I don't take hospital or birth center births anymore is because there's so much fear in the practitioners and in the nurses. And then in home birth, I've found recently that a lot of these midwives that have trained with these preceptors in this city, they're all practicing the same way. Yeah. And a lot of them left that birth center that I birthed at to start home birth practice because they didn't want to adhere to the protocols of the birth center, but they're still bringing the traumas with them into the home birth. They're still doing the Benadryl and the this and the that. They're still doing these protocols on these women in home birth. And then I'm having to break down their birth trauma and tell them, choose Anya. Literally. I mean, or GB. GB is like old school Ina May. She's like older and, she's the OG, but she chooses you. You don't choose her. She's truthfully, that's
Anya's going to be that soon too.
Yeah. Well, she is that. Yeah. And her and I want to do that as a team because I've gotten to that point as a doula. Like if people find me and want me to be in their birth, they should do their research and know I'm not going to take you if you do a hospital. I'm not going to take you if you do a birth center because I don't want them to ask why. If you're having to ask me why, then I don't know why you're asking me to be your doula. I can refer you to many doulas, but as a doula, I want somebody that I can break down your fear if you have it and you're willing to do the work, or you've already done the work and let's go. Let's have a baby. But if you do have fear and you want me as your doula in your birth, you have to be willing to break down that fear. And your partner has to break down that fear. Because I can't just work with the mom. Whoever's in your birth space. Like if your mom's going to come to your birth and you're dead set on your mom coming to your birth, if she has birth trauma or if she has fear, she's got to be in the appointments with us. We all got to break it down because... You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think Anya and I have kind of gotten to that point, both as the practitioner, like her and then me, like, and it's really empowering to say as a birth worker, I don't want to experience trauma anymore. Because we deserve that too. Because like as a doula, I would come home crying, like sometimes. Mom wouldn't have trauma, but what I witnessed, the midwife being pushy or this or that, like it was just a lot of like me like protecting, like don't do that, and it's just like, it's exhausting. And I couldn't be present for my family. And I think Anya's the same way. And she's like, I want to just have really cool, really awesome births. That's what she said to me, yeah. And it's not selfish. I don't think it's selfish. I think it's raising the bar. I think if more birth workers did that, then more women would be like, wait, why? Why won't you take me? Or why won't you do a hospital birth? Or why won't you? Well, why are you doing the hospital birth? Let's break that down. Like you don't deserve to do that to yourself. You deserve to have a badass birth. And if you want to, come to our team. We'll help you get there. But you have to be willing to do it. You have to be willing to break down that fear. And you can have a badass birth. I know that Anya and I together are gonna create badass births. The acts of God, the things that happen, like something happening to baby, something happening to mom, whatever, that's acts of God. Whether you're in a hospital or whether you're at home, nothing's gonna change that. God is God. You cannot mess with that. And the more that people understand that, the better off they'll be in birth. But if you don't mess with birth, like in any way, shape, or form, like you're not telling a mom to induce herself, like you're not messing with it, you're just there to love and support on the mom, birth is awesome. And Anya and I have both experienced that. And I don't even think a lot of the home birth midwives that do what they do have experienced that. It's really sad.
It is sad.
Yeah. And doulas too. All the doulas out there, if you want to break down your fear, like if you're taking on hospital birth after hospital birth after hospital birth and you're coming home crying because your client ended up in a C-section and you don't know where you went wrong as a doula, it's not you. It's the education of your client. You can either send them to me or I can empower you to educate your client. Either way, holler at me. I'll break down the fear because I can break down any birth pretty much, unless it's acts of God.
Yeah.
But most of the time, those acts of God are caused by other things too, like Tdap, flu, things like that, you know. I could get into the, that whole thing too, but yeah, I mean, when we don't mess with God, birth is awesome.
I'm waiting for the merch. I'm like, you guys need to do the merch.
Girl. I told her, I was like, we need to do photo shoots of us like in like leather jackets, like
I love it.
The rebels.
You totally should.
Like
we have all the cameras. Let's do it.
No, like the rebel birth crew or something, like ready to birth with no fear. You know what I mean? Like, no fear.
Oh, gosh.
Seriously. I love her so much. And yeah, if you're in Austin, Texas and you need a good team, holler at us because we're ready. Yeah.
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 I already got on the schedule. So
yes.
Yes. She's like, I'm going to fly in. I'm like, do it.
Yes.
Hopefully I'm not going to be much work, but we'll see.
No.
I kind of like went through the whole like regaining responsibility anatomy of my own body. So
especially as a massage therapist, you know the body.
Yeah. Yeah. I trust it. I trust that it does what it needs to do. Totally. Okay, let's get one like last thing. I'm like,
totally.
Those are too short for you and Anya. I'm like, I can talk like endlessly.
Yes.
We have a couple of questions, but I really wanted to get something in about the dads.
Okay.
Because they often forgotten, as we talked about. I had a couple of clients who had a horrible situation happen. They ended up in a hospital, very like almost like near death experience, and they got PTSD pretty much from it. So how can they? Because obviously men are protector, right? So they want to protect you, but in a hospital setting, as we talked about, you kind of lose that power. So what can
break it down
in the workshop?
Just holler at me.
Okay.
I can literally break down what happened. Yeah. I mean, if it's an act of God, I can break that down too. If it's something that just like the placenta abruption or uterus rupture or something crazy out of the blue, that's like 1% chance happened, I can break that down too.
So they're not scared second time around
Totally.
and trying to home birth again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Even if it ended up in a C-section, you can still do a home birth second time. I've helped a lot of women do it. That's my jam, redemptive birth. And a lot of it is breaking down the husband, because a lot of people, when you think about birth trauma, you think about the mom. Nobody thinks about the husband. He's witnessed the love of his life and the baby, and just he's seen the abuse.
Yeah.
He's heard the abuse. You know what I mean? And a lot of the men that I help break down the trauma, their trauma is the helpless feeling.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's literally like, I mean, this is going to sound really harsh, but it's like witnessing your wife getting raped and you can't do anything about it. Like, that's a helpless feeling. That's just like, I want to do something, but if I step in, I'm going to either get shot or, you know what I mean? It's like the doctors are going to kick me out, or they're going to do, it's like the husband wants to help and step in and say, you know, hey, can we do this? But it's like your baby, the life of your baby and the health of your wife are in these people's hands, and you don't want to piss them off because then they're going to treat your wife and your baby differently. Are they going to recess? Are they going to really work on the baby as hard afterwards if they hate me and they hate the wife because we've been trying to advocate for ourselves? So again, people go into this like fawn mode, and that creates trauma because you're giving away your power to someone. And for men, that is so hard. For women, we can become vulnerable and we can become feminine and we can give away our power to the man, you know? But like for men, that's really hard. And so birth trauma, it is PTSD. And with men, it's more EMDR I can do with them. So it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing, because they physically witness with their eyes. So EMDR is like PTSD that you witness, somebody getting murdered, or, you know, like it's good for witnessing trauma. So I am a somatic EMDR certified practitioner. So I can help people who have like visual trauma kind of help the brain and the body reconnect that and then align the nervous system. So with the men in the birth trauma, it's a little bit more EMDR-y, whereas the women are experiencing it. So it's an experience. So I have to get them to tap into their body somatically, and it's stored in their body. But for the men, it's in the brain. It's here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like true PTSD in the men. And then the women, it's like more of like a sense of like feeling like they're just dysregulated.
Just disconnect from the body probably.
And it turns into PPD, postpartum depression, or postpartum anxiety, or or rage, or, you know, it comes out in other ways. Dis-ease of the body, and then can eventually turn into disease of the body. And it's a whole thing.
Wow.
It's a whole thing. I can even equate like women who develop like Lyme or lupus afterwards back to their birth trauma.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have not tapped into that. That was fascinating. But do you have it on your podcast somewhere? Do you talk about like what kind of diseases can come out?
Disease of the body? No, but that is one that I have down that I need to do.
Okay.
It's basically, Bessel van der Kolk, who's the originator of PTSD work. He has a book called The Body Keeps Score. It's a really great book.
Like all my clients have it on their bookshelf.
Totally. Yeah. It's an amazing book. So he's the originator of PTSD work. And he's the one who figured out that we store trauma within our body somewhere.
100%.
And so it can be like in your shoulder, and then like you just have like chronic shoulder pain and you don't know what's going on. Well, guess what? There's trauma that's stored there for some reason. Like
I had a really cool case in New York where I had a client, and she, every time she would talk about her dad, her lower back would like spasm.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. And I kept asking her questions like go in and then release. Then she started crying. She cried for like 30 minutes.
In birth. Oh my gosh. There's women that'll release trauma that they didn't know had stored. And I'm just like, they look like they're about to cry. And I'm like, you can cry right now. It's okay. That's a release. It's a release of trauma. It's beautiful. But you'll feel pains that come up in birth, and that's your body releasing trauma too. There's a lot there. So yeah, when you store trauma in the body, it creates dis-ease of the body. And if you're constantly in fight or flight because your body is constantly reacting to this trauma that you have stored, you're going to be releasing cortisol. It's going to up your acidity of the body. It's going to create horrible sleep patterns. I mean, it's just down the spiral goes. But if your vagus nerve is in bad shape, your gut biome, your, bifidobacteria is bad, and then that creates a brain, and then it's the whole body becomes dis-eased, which creates disease.
Yep.
So it's just, it all can start with birth with a woman. She could be like the happiest, carefree yogi. And then she has birth trauma, and it's a completely different human. Completely different.
The light goes away.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's my mission, is to prevent that. Like, I love that Anya and we talk about it together all the time. Like, we love doing these redemption births because just the light comes back on. It's literally that light that was shut off. You see it come back on. And it's like, there's no feeling like that in the world that's better than to like help somebody heal themselves, you know? But what if we didn't have to do that? What if the light never went out, you know? And so that's kind of where my 6-week thing is. And
you said in October?
It starts October 6th.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have it on my website.
Link everything below. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Unfortunately, out of time.
Yeah.
I had like some more new questions, but I guess maybe next time.
Girl, we could do a live on Instagram together.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I love that you're doing lives for like birth awareness. Is that correct?
Yeah, birth trauma awareness.
Birth trauma awareness. Yeah. Definitely follow Emmy on all the platforms. You have Instagram, website, and do you have anything else?
Yep. It's all at Emmy Robbin Doula for Instagram, X, and Facebook.
Perfect. Yeah. So, thank you so much. It was such insightful discussion. I'm absolutely obsessed, and now I want you in my birth too.
Yes, girl.
I mean, actually, listening to you and Anya, I'm like, I kind of want to have kids now.
Yes,
because you both promoted such a like beautiful experience rather than like, ooh, it's gonna be horrible.
No, girl.
Every woman needs that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Market is the best experience you're gonna have. So
it is. It's not the worst. It's the best.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, I like that we're finishing on a positive note.
Yeah.
So again, thank
41.
you so much.
I had my second at 41, y'all.
There you go.
Might even have more.
Woo. Okay, we're waiting for that. All right, guys, thank you so much. Don't forget to follow us. Follow Emmy on all her socials, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.